The diner went quiet the moment the leather-clad stranger stepped through the door, and by the time he asked his question, not a single fork was moving. It was a little past noon on a bright Tuesday in the small town of Caldwell Junction, the kind of ordinary day when the sun hits the windows of Marge's diner just right and everyone inside is too busy with their meatloaf and coffee to notice anything unusual. The man who walked in changed that instantly. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a worn leather vest covered in patches, his arms sleeved in faded tattoos, his boots heavy against the linoleum floor. A motorcycle helmet hung from one hand. Every head in the diner turned. Mothers pulled their children a little closer. An old farmer at the counter set down his cup and watched the man, the way people watch something they've decided, without knowing anything about it, to be afraid of. The man didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't let it show. He walked straight to the counter, sat down, and ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a bowl of soup and a slice of bread. He ate slowly, quietly, like someone counting every bite as if it might be his last for a while. When he finished, he didn't leave. Instead, he looked toward the waitress, a woman named Odalis Ferreira, who had worked at Marge's for almost 11 years, and asked a question that would echo through that town for months to come. Before we go further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in stories that remind us not to judge people by how they look, hit that like button, drop a comment below, share this with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Whispering Tales Stories so you never miss a story like this one. Odalis had seen a lot of strange things behind that counter over the years, but something about this man's voice stopped her cold. He asked quietly, almost embarrassed, if he could take the leftover bread and the untouched vegetables from a plate that a family at the corner booth had left behind, wrapped up, so he could bring them home to his daughter. He said it fast, like he wanted to get the words out before his pride could stop him. The diner, which moments earlier had been humming with quiet chatter and the clink of silverware, fell completely silent. Nobody moved. Even the cook in the back stopped scraping the grill. Odalis didn't know what to say at first. She'd worked in that diner long enough to see plenty of hard times pass through. Farmers who'd lost their crops, families who'd lost their homes, veterans who came back from wherever they'd been and never quite found their footing again. But something about the way this man asked, like he expected to be turned away, like he had already prepared himself for humiliation, hit her somewhere deep. She looked at him a moment longer, and instead of answering, she asked him his name. He told her it was Weston Cade, and that his daughter's name was Marisol, and that she was 7 years old, and that things had been hard since her mother passed away the winter before. Weston explained in a low voice meant only for Odalis, but somehow heard by half the diner because the silence carried every word. That he worked odd jobs when he could find them, mostly fixing motorcycles and doing small engine repairs out of a shed behind the trailer he rented on the edge of town. Work had been slow. The bills hadn't been. He said he wasn't asking for charity, only for what would otherwise be thrown away, because Marisol loved vegetables the way most kids loved candy, and he hadn't been able to afford fresh produce in almost 2 weeks. He said all of this looking down at the counter, not at Odalis, like a man confessing something shameful instead of simply telling the truth about being poor. For a moment, nobody in the diner said a word. Then something remarkable happened. The old farmer at the counter, a man named Harlan Petrosky who had lived in Caldwell Junction his whole life and had watched the town change more times than he cared to count, stood up from his stool. He walked over to Weston, placed a hand on his shoulder, and told him that no man should ever have to ask permission to feed his child. Then he turned to Odalis and asked her to bring the biggest plate in the kitchen on him. What followed felt to everyone who witnessed it like something out of a story rather than an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. A woman 2 booths down, a schoolteacher named Prisha Anandan, quietly asked the cook to add a second plate to go, this one filled with warm food rather than leftovers, because she said no 7-year-old should have to eat cold vegetables when there was a diner full of people who could do better. One by one, without much discussion, without anyone making a speech about it, the customers in Marge's diner began putting money on the counter. Not a lot from any one person, a few dollars here, a 10 there. But by the time Weston finally looked up from the counter, Odalis was holding an envelope, thick enough to make his hands shake when she placed it in them. Weston tried to refuse. He said this wasn't why he'd come in, that he only wanted the leftovers, that he could handle the rest himself once work picked back up. But Harlan, still standing beside him, said something that people in that diner would repeat for years afterward. He said that pride was a fine thing to carry when times were good. But a man raising a daughter alone didn't owe anyone an apology for needing help, and the town wasn't doing him a favor. It was doing itself one, because a place that let a good father go hungry wasn't a place worth calling home. Audalus packed 2 full containers of food, still warm, along with a small bag of fresh vegetables from the kitchen's own stock, more than Marisol could finish in a week. As Weston stood to leave, his eyes rimmed red in a way he clearly hadn't expected and clearly didn't want anyone to see. He thanked each person by name, even the ones he'd never met before that afternoon, as if committing this moment to memory, the way a man remembers the exact day his luck changed. Word of what happened at Marge's diner spread through Caldwell Junction faster than anyone could have predicted. Within days, a rotation had formed, mothers and neighbors dropping off casseroles and school clothes at Weston's trailer without being asked, a mechanic from 2 towns over offering him steady work rebuilding engines, a scholarship fund quietly started for Marisol by the very schoolteacher who'd asked for that second plate. Weston, a man who had walked into a diner that day expecting nothing but scraps, walked out having found something he hadn't, realized he was looking for a community willing to see him not as a stranger in leather and tattoos, but as a father doing everything he could for his little girl. Months later, Weston would return to Marge's diner, this time with Marisol beside him, her small hand wrapped tightly in his. He didn't come to ask for anything. He came to say thank you, and to quietly pay for another table's meal without telling them who had done it, the same way a stranger had once done for him. Odalis watched from behind the counter, and for the first time in a long while, she found herself blinking back tears while pretending to wipe down the register. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that kindness still exists in this world, and that a single moment of compassion can change the entire course of someone's life. And before we close this story, if you feel it in your heart, type the word kindness in the comments below, so we know this story reached you the way it was meant to. In the end, what began as a quiet, almost desperate, question from a man the world had too quickly judged became something far greater than a simple act of charity. It became a reminder to an entire town, and now to everyone watching, that the people we overlook are often carrying burdens far heavier than we could ever guess, and that sometimes the smallest act of kindness, offered without hesitation, is enough to change a life forever.